Hey, welcome back. Let everything quiet down, and we'll ease into a slow tale from Norse mythology. Before Ragnarok can be understood as an event, it must be understood as an expectation. In Norse belief, the end of the world was never imagined as a sudden catastrophe that arrived without warning. It was not a surprise, nor a punishment delivered out of nowhere. Ragnarok was woven into existence from the beginning, embedded in the structure of time itself. The gods knew it was coming. Giants knew it was coming. Even humans and fragments and echoes understood that the world they lived in was temporary. This awareness shaped everything. To the Norse, time was not a straight road leading endlessly forward. It was cyclical, rhythmic, and burdened with inevitability. Creation did not erase destruction. It postponed it. And destruction, in turn, was not final. It cleared the ground for what would come after. Ragnarok was not merely the death of gods. It was the closing of one cycle and the opening of another. To understand why Ragnarok was unavoidable, we have to begin with how the Norse understood fate. Fate was not chance, it was not probability, and it was not a moral judgment. It simply was. The Norse word, often translated as fate, carries a weight closer to that which has been set. It describes outcomes already anchored in the fabric of existence. Choices still mattered, courage still mattered, honor still mattered, but the final shape of things could not be altered, only met. Even Odin, the All-Father, ruler of the gods, was bound by fate. This is one of the most striking aspects of Norse mythology. The gods are powerful, knowledgeable, and long-lived, but they are not omnipotent. They do not control destiny. They navigate within it. Above gods and giants alike sit the Norns. At the roots of the world tree Yggdrasil, near a well whose waters hold memory and truth, dwell three figures who shape all outcomes. Urther, whose name is tied to what has already happened. Verthandi, representing what is unfolding now. And Skuld, whose name points toward what must come. Together they carve fate into existence. They do not argue, they do not debate, they do not show mercy or cruelty. They record and enforce the natural order of time. Every life, divine or mortal, passes beneath their notice. Every thread is measured. The gods themselves visit this place. Odin in particular returns again and again, desperate to learn more than he already knows. He sacrifices an eye at Mimir's well for wisdom. He hangs himself on Yggdrasil for knowledge of runes. He consults seeresses and dead prophets. He listens, he watches, he remembers. And through all of it, one truth remains unchanged. Ragnarok will come. This knowledge does not paralyze the gods, it sharpens them. Because in Norse belief, knowing the end does not remove the obligation to act honorably in the present. If anything, it intensifies it. A warrior fights knowing death is likely. A god rules knowing the world will burn. Meaning is found not in avoiding fate, but in how one meets it. This worldview shaped the very structure of the Norse cosmos. The universe is organized around tension. At its center stands Yggdrasil, the immense ash tree that binds all realms together. Its branches stretch into the heavens. Its roots reach into darkness, ice, and memory. Creatures gnaw at it constantly. Serpents coil around its roots. Stags strip its leaves. Rot and renewal occur at the same time. The tree survives, but it is never untouched. This is not a stable cosmos. It is a strained one. The 9 realms that hang upon Yggdrasil are not isolated worlds. They influence one another constantly. Actions in one realm ripple outward. Balance is temporary. Conflict is natural. Asgard, the realm of the gods, is not eternal. Its walls can be breached. Its guardians can fail. Midgard, the world of humans, is protected by divine structures, but it is fragile. Storms, famine, and violence are always close. Jotunheim, the land of giants, represents raw forces of chaos and nature, neither purely evil nor aligned with order. Niflheim and Muspelheim anchor the extremes of cold and fire. forces that existed before creation and will outlast it. From the beginning, the world is built on borrowed time. Even its creation carries the seed of its destruction. The cosmos itself is formed from the body of a primordial being. The act of creation is also an act of violence. The sky is made from bone, the sea from blood, the land from flesh. Order is imposed, but it rests on the remains of chaos. This matters, because Ragnarök is not an invasion from outside reality. It is reality reasserting itself. The giants do not suddenly become enemies at the end. They have always been there, watching, waiting, responding to the actions of the gods. Fire and ice do not appear out of nowhere. They were present before the gods ever ruled. Ragnarök is not betrayal of the cosmic system, it is its fulfillment. This is why prophecy in Norse myth is so precise. The end is not vague. It is detailed. Names are given. Battles are specified. Deaths are listed. Survivors are identified. Even what comes after is described. This precision does not exist to offer hope of avoidance. It exists to remove illusion. When Odin seeks prophecy, he is not trying to stop Ragnarök. He is trying to understand it well enough to meet it with dignity. This is a crucial distinction. Unlike later traditions where apocalypse is a punishment for moral failure, Ragnarök is not caused by sin. It is caused by imbalance, inevitability, and the accumulated consequences of earlier actions. The gods do not fall because they are wicked. They fall because they are part of a system that cannot remain static forever. Even goodness does not grant immunity. Baldur, the most beloved of the gods, will die, not because he deserves it, but because his death is necessary to signal the beginning of the end. Odin, the wisest of the gods, will fall, not because he is foolish, but because knowledge cannot overcome fate. Thor, the strongest of the gods, will succeed and fail at the same time. He will defeat his enemy and still perish. Heroism does not prevent Ragnarök. It defines it. For humans living in the Norse world, this belief system shaped daily life. Harsh environments, short lifespans, and constant uncertainty reinforced the idea that security was temporary. Winter could kill, storms could kill, disease could kill. Violence could arrive without warning. The mythology did not promise safety. It promised meaning. To live well was not to live forever. It was to live honorably within the time allotted. This is why warriors dreamed of Valhalla, not as an escape from death, but as preparation for a final duty. Even the afterlife was not restful. It was a staging ground. The gods themselves model this attitude. They build walls, knowing those walls will fall. They train warriors, knowing the final battle will be lost. They rule, knowing their children may become their enemies. And still, they act. Ragnarök, then, is not a story about despair. It is a story about clarity. When the future is known, the present becomes sharper. Every oath matters more. Every betrayal carries greater weight. Every act of courage becomes a statement against inevitability, even if it cannot overturn it. This tension between knowledge and action is the emotional engine of the entire myth, and it begins long before swords are drawn or worlds burn. It begins with awareness. The gods are not blind. They hear the warnings, they see the signs, they feel the slow tightening of fate around the cosmos. Ragnarök is foretold because it must be. And in that foretelling lies the foundation of everything that follows. Ragnarök does not begin with fire or frost. It begins with a figure who does not belong fully anywhere. Loki is not the source of all evil in Norse mythology, nor is he a misunderstood hero. He is something far more dangerous to a fragile cosmic order, a boundary breaker, a figure who moves between worlds, roles, and loyalties without ever fully settling into one. And in a universe built on tension, that kind of instability matters. Loki's origins already set him apart. He is born among the giants, a race often portrayed as adversaries of the gods, yet not uniformly monstrous or malicious. Giants represent raw forces of nature, ancient powers older than the ordered cosmos itself. Fire, ice, stone, hunger, flood. They are not evil by default. They are uncontained. Loki carries that inheritance. Yet, he is welcomed into Asgard. He shares blood oaths with Odin himself, a bond stronger than friendship and heavier than convenience. Loki walks the halls of the gods, feasts at their tables, and joins them on their adventures. He saves them as often as he endangers them. This duality is not accidental. It is essential. Loki exists at the fault line between order and chaos. In the early myths, Loki's presence is disruptive but useful. He creates problems, but he also solves them. When gods lose prized possessions, Loki retrieves them. When they need cleverness rather than strength, Loki provides it. His mind moves faster than theirs. His morals bend more easily. But each solution comes with a cost. Every time Loki intervenes, he pushes the system slightly further from balance. He normalizes deception. He makes betrayal survivable. He proves that rules can be bent without immediate consequence. This is how cracks form. The gods tolerate Loki because he is effective. They laugh at his insults because they are clever. They excuse his behavior because, so far, the world keeps turning. But tolerance is not trust. And Loki is keenly aware of that. He is never fully accepted, never fully secure, always the outsider, even when seated beside Odin. This resentment does not explode all at once. It accumulates slowly, layered beneath jokes and shared victories. In Norse mythology, betrayal is rarely sudden. It is built. The most dangerous consequences of Loki's existence are not his tricks, but his children. From unions that cross the boundaries of what is considered natural, Loki fathers beings who embody the very forces Ragnarok will unleash. Fenrir the wolf grows at an unnatural rate. His size increases rapidly. His presence inspires fear even among the gods. There is nothing subtle about him. He is raw strength, barely restrained. The gods see the danger early. Prophecies warn them that Fenrir will play a role in their destruction. And here, the gods make a critical choice. Rather than kill the wolf outright, they attempt to control him. They bind him. At first with chains he breaks easily. Then with stronger restraints, which also fail. Finally, they commission a magical binding, light as silk and impossibly strong. Fenrir senses deception. He does not submit willingly. He agrees only if one of the gods places a hand in his mouth as a pledge of good faith. Tyr steps forward. When Fenrir realizes he has been tricked, he bites. Tyr loses his hand. Trust is destroyed. The gods succeed in restraining the wolf, but the cost is permanent. This moment matters more than it appears. The gods have chosen fear over honor, control over fairness. They have confirmed the worst suspicions of a being already destined to hate them. Fenrir does not forget. Nor does Loki. Jörmungandr, the world serpent, is cast into the sea that encircles Midgard. There, he grows until his body coils around the entire world, biting his own tail. He becomes a living boundary, holding the oceans in place. The gods believe they have neutralized another threat. In truth, they have only displaced it. Hel, Loki's daughter, is sent to rule over the realm of the dead. She is neither fully alive nor fully dead, her appearance split between decay and vitality. Her domain becomes the destination for those who die of sickness or old age, rather than heroism. The gods do not destroy Loki's children. They isolate them. This pattern repeats. Problems are contained, not resolved. From the gods' perspective, these choices are practical. Killing Fenrir risks fulfilling prophecy. Allowing Jörmungandr to remain among them is dangerous. Leaving Hel in Asgard would blur boundaries they depend on. But from another perspective, the result is resentment hardened into inevitability. The enemies of Ragnarok are not born in the final moments. They are created, confined, and left to grow. Loki watches all of this unfold. His children are punished for prophecies they did not write. He is tolerated, but never trusted. The gods continue to benefit from his cleverness while preparing for the possibility that he will turn against them. This awareness changes him. Loki does not rebel immediately. He continues to move among the gods. He continues to assist them, but his loyalty becomes conditional. And conditions are fragile. In Norse myth, loyalty is tied to reciprocity. Oaths matter. Hospitality matters. Honor is not abstract. It is enacted through behavior. When those bonds erode, vengeance becomes acceptable. The gods begin to close ranks without fully excluding Loki. They whisper, they plan, they prepare contingencies. And Loki notices. The tension escalates with each insult dismissed as humor, each slight brushed aside as tradition. Loki's sharp tongue turns from playful to cutting. His words expose truths others would rather ignore. This makes him dangerous. Because words have power in Norse culture, naming something aloud gives it weight. Calling out hypocrisy threatens stability. By the time the gods move openly against Loki, the relationship is already broken. But even then, Ragnarok is not inevitable yet. The final fracture requires something more. It requires the death of innocence. That comes later. For now, what matters is this. The cosmos is already compromised. Bonds meant to hold it together have been weakened. Forces meant to remain in balance have been displaced rather than reconciled. Ragnarok is no longer just prophecy. It is being prepared. Quietly. Inevitably. Not by monsters alone, but by choices made in fear, pride, and the belief that control can replace trust. The world does not end because Loki exists. It begins to end because no one truly knows what to do with him. Before Ragnarok becomes visible in the world, it announces itself quietly through fear. Not fear of battle, not fear of monsters. Fear of loss. Baldur, the son of Odin and Frigg, begins to dream of his own death. In Norse mythology, dreams are not dismissed as idle visions. They are warnings. Echoes of fate brushing against the waking mind. When a god dreams of death, the dream is not symbolic, it is literal. Baldur's dreams are dark, persistent, and unmistakable. He sees himself falling. He senses grief spreading outward from his absence. He feels the stillness that follows his end. The gods are shaken. Baldur is not merely another god among many. He represents light, beauty, fairness, and reconciliation. He is beloved not only because of his lineage, but because of his nature. He is gentle where others are harsh, just where others are cunning, trusted where others are feared. If a being like Baldur can die, then no one is safe. Frigg reacts as any mother would. She refuses to accept the dreams as fixed. She believes that fate, if confronted early enough, can be negotiated with. So she travels across the worlds, extracting oaths from everything that exists. Fire and water swear not to harm Baldur. Stone and metal swear. Illness and poison swear. Animals, weapons, plants, and elements all promise that they will never strike him. Nothing is left untouched, except one thing: mistletoe. It is young, it grows high, it seems harmless. Frigg deems it too insignificant to bother with. The gods celebrate Baldur's apparent invulnerability. They turn it into a game. They throw weapons at him for sport. Spears glance off, stones bounce harmlessly away, blades fail to cut. Laughter fills the hall, and Loki watches. Disguised, he approaches Frigg and learns what she has done and what she has overlooked. The information is offered freely, innocently. There is no sense of danger in the moment. But Loki understands patterns. He fashions a dart from mistletoe. Then he finds Hother. Hother is Baldur's brother. He is blind. He does not participate in the games, standing apart while others laugh. Loki places the dart in his hand and guides his arm, offering to let him join. Holder throws. Balder falls. The silence that follows is total. This is not simply a death, it is a rupture. The gods rush forward, but there is nothing to be done. The oaths cannot undo what they allowed. The oversight cannot be corrected. Fate has passed the point where negotiation is possible. Balder is dead. For the first time, a god has fallen not in battle, but through trickery and inevitability. Grief overwhelms Asgard. Odin understands immediately what this means. The prophecy he has feared is no longer distant. Ragnarok has begun its approach. The gods attempt one last reversal. They send a messenger to Hel's realm, offering ransom for Balder's return. Hel agrees, on one condition: every being in existence must weep for Balder. They do. Stones weep, trees weep, animals weep, gods weep, humans weep. Only one refuses. A giantess named Hok. She says Balder has done nothing for her. She will not mourn him. Hel keeps her word. Balder remains among the dead. The gods know who Tzok truly is. Loki has crossed the final line. He is captured, bound, and punished, but the damage is irreversible. Balder's death is not just personal tragedy. It is cosmological confirmation. The best of the gods can fall. Innocence offers no protection. From this point forward, everything changes. Trust erodes, joy fades. The gods prepare not for peace, but for war. Ragnarok is no longer a distant prophecy. It is inevitable. The death of Balder marks the point of no return. The world continues, but it does so under a shadow. It cannot escape. After the death of Balder, the world does not end. That is what makes this period so unsettling. Life continues. Seasons still turn. The sun still rises. The gods still rule from Asgard. Humans still farm, trade, feud, and prey. On the surface, the cosmos appears intact. But beneath that surface, something essential has shifted. In Norse tradition, the most dangerous changes are not sudden. They are gradual. They unfold quietly, almost politely, until one day the world realizes it no longer recognizes itself. This is the long dimming. Balder's death does not unleash immediate chaos. Instead, it removes an anchor. He was not a god of war or domination. He was a god of balance, mercy, and trust. His presence stabilized the moral center of the divine world. Without him, the gods still function, but they do so without harmony. The first sign is the erosion of oaths. In Norse society, an oath is not symbolic, it is binding. To swear falsely is to weaken the invisible structures that hold communities together. When oaths lose their meaning, violence becomes inevitable. After Balder's death, promises are still spoken, but they no longer carry the same weight. Alliances fray. Suspicion replaces trust. Even among the gods, words are chosen more carefully, not out of wisdom, but out of fear. This fear spreads downward. Among humans, kinship begins to collapse. Brothers turn against brothers. Sons rise against fathers. Families fracture along lines of survival rather than loyalty. These are not isolated tragedies, they are symptoms. The myths describe a world where murder becomes common and unremarkable, where hospitality is denied, where betrayal is no longer shocking. Honor does not vanish overnight, it erodes. Feuds escalate faster, mercy is seen as weakness, revenge becomes easier to justify. The gods observe this decay and recognize it. They do not intervene. This is another crucial choice. In earlier ages, the gods actively shaped human affairs. They rewarded loyalty, punished transgression, and enforced cosmic order. But now, intervention feels dangerous. Every action risks accelerating the prophecy they fear. So they hesitate, and hesitation allows collapse to spread. This period is not marked by spectacular disasters, but by moral exhaustion. People stop expecting fairness. They stop believing that restraint will be rewarded. Even law loses authority. In assemblies meant to resolve disputes, voices grow louder, not wiser. Decisions are enforced through strength rather than consensus. Justice becomes something taken, not given. The sagas reflect this anxiety. They were composed in cultures that understood how quickly social order could fail. Long winters, scarce resources, and constant threat made cooperation essential. The idea that these bonds might dissolve was terrifying. Ragnarök reflects that fear. It is not just the end of the gods, it is the end of civilization as a shared agreement. The gods themselves mirror this breakdown. Odin grows more withdrawn. His pursuit of knowledge intensifies, but it becomes increasingly solitary. He trusts fewer voices. He listens more to the dead than to the living. Thor continues to protect Midgard, but his actions become more reactive. He defends rather than restores. His strength holds the line, but does not heal what has been broken. Freyr, once associated with fertility and prosperity, begins to lose influence. The land grows less generous. Harvests become unreliable. Hunger sharpens tempers. The balance between realms weakens. Giants cross boundaries more freely. Monsters roam farther from where they were confined. The edges of the world grow porous. This is not invasion. It is seepage. The cosmos is losing its ability to contain itself. For humans, this era is defined by anxiety. They sense that something is wrong, even if they cannot name it. Stories change. Songs grow darker. Omens are interpreted with dread rather than curiosity. The future no longer feels open. It feels closing. Children are raised with fewer expectations of peace. Survival becomes the primary virtue. Generosity becomes risky. Trust becomes rare. The myths emphasize that this decay is universal. No corner of the world is spared. No realm remains untouched. Importantly, this collapse is not framed as punishment for moral failure. It is framed as consequence. A system strained too long begins to break. Baldr's death did not cause this collapse by itself. It revealed it. It confirmed that the structures meant to protect goodness were already compromised. By this stage, Ragnarök no longer needs to be forced. The world is moving toward it on its own. The long dimming is the quietest phase of the end and the most revealing, because it shows that destruction does not always arrive with fire. Sometimes it arrives as indifference. And once indifference takes hold, the final storms require very little effort to begin. The long dimming does not end with silence. It deepens into cold. After the moral and social collapse begins, the world itself responds. Not with immediate destruction, but with withdrawal. Warmth recedes. Predictability vanishes. The rhythms that once governed survival begin to fail. This is Fimbulwinter. In Norse prophecy, Fimbulwinter is not a single storm or a harsh season. It is 3 winters in succession, with no summer between them. Snow falls from every direction. Winds cut without mercy. The sun offers little comfort even when it appears. Cold becomes permanent. For people living in the north, winter was already the most dangerous time of year. Food stores dwindled, travel became difficult, livestock died. Illness spread easily in confined spaces. A winter without end is not symbolic. It is extinction. The myths describe a world where snow piles higher each year, where ice locks the land in place, and where the ground refuses to yield crops. Fields that once sustained families turn barren. Rivers freeze thick enough to silence trade. Hunger becomes universal. This is not localized famine. It spreads across Midgard, touching every community. Even the strong feel it. Even the prepared are overwhelmed. Families fracture further. Parents are forced to choose which children eat. Neighbors stop sharing. Old bonds of mutual aid collapse under desperation. Theft increases. Violence follows. Winter strips away pretense. It reduces life to essentials. In the cold, the myths say, morality continues to erode. Survival eclipses honor. Compassion becomes a liability. Those who cling to old values often perish first. This is not because goodness is wrong. It is because the world no longer supports it. The cold also carries cosmic significance. Fimbulwinter is not just weather, it is a signal. The wolves Skol and Hati, long destined to chase the sun and moon, finally catch their prey. Light falters. Time itself feels unstable. Days blur. Nights lengthen. The loss of the sun and moon is not described as sudden darkness, but as diminishing certainty. Navigation becomes difficult. Seasons lose meaning. The sky no longer reassures. Above, the stars fade. Below, fear deepens. The gods are not untouched by this winter. Asgard grows quieter. Feasts become rare. The halls of the gods feel colder, both physically and emotionally. Even divine fire struggles against the encroaching frost. Thor continues his patrols, defending Midgard from threats that grow bolder as boundaries weaken. But even he cannot restore warmth. Odin watches. He understands what Fimbulwinter represents. It is the world's final preparation, a stripping down, a removal of excess. In Norse cosmology, cold is older than fire. Niflheim existed before the ordered cosmos. Ice is not merely destructive, it is primordial. Fimbulwinter is the past returning. The world slides backward toward its earliest state, undoing the fragile balance the gods imposed. Animals behave strangely, migration patterns break, predators grow desperate, prey vanishes, forests fall silent. Humans read omens everywhere. Every crack in the ice becomes a warning. Every failed harvest feels personal. The sense of being abandoned intensifies. Some turn to prayer. Others turn to violence. Many simply endure. The myths emphasize endurance. This is not a heroic age. There are no great victories here. There is only survival through cold nights and endless hunger. Fimbulwinter does not kill the world outright. It weakens it. By the time the final winter settles, Midgard is exhausted, populations are reduced, communities are scattered. The capacity to resist what comes next is gone. And that is its purpose. Fimbulwinter prepares the world for the breaking of all bonds. When warmth finally fails entirely, when the cold feels permanent, the last restraints begin to crack. What was once held in place by strength, tradition, and fear is now brittle. And brittle things do not survive pressure for long. Fimbulwinter does not end cleanly. It does not lift like an ordinary season, with thaw and relief. It breaks. And when it breaks, it takes the world's restraints with it. In Norse prophecy, there is a sense that the universe has been held together by bindings, not only ropes and chains, but agreements, boundaries, and laws that keep forces in their places. Many of those restraints were created by the gods themselves. Others are older than them, woven into the structure of existence. By the time Fimbulwinter has done its work, those restraints are brittle. Then the snapping begins. The first and most terrible bond to fail is the one holding Fenrir. For a long time, the wolf has been restrained by an impossible fetter, light as silk and strong as iron. It is held not because Fenrir accepted it, but because the cosmos itself, for a time, supported the god's control. But now the world is weakened. The roots of Yggdrasil tremble, the rhythms of nature have collapsed. Social order among humans has frayed. Even the gods' confidence has thinned. In that vulnerable state, Fenrir strains. And at last, the binding gives. When Fenrir breaks free, it is not only a physical escape. It is a symbolic reversal. The gods once demonstrated they could contain the most frightening thing they knew. Now the world learns that containment was temporary. The wolf's jaws yawn wider than any ordinary creature's. The myths speak of him with an almost cosmic scale, as if he is not just an animal but a force that can swallow meaning itself. Fenrir runs, and his freedom sends shockwaves through the remaining bonds. At sea, another boundary fails. Jörmungandr, the serpent that encircles Midgard, stirs. For ages he has been both menace and stability, a living ring around the world's waters. His presence has kept certain limits in place, even as it threatened those who sailed. Now he rises. The seas churn with unnatural violence. Waves crash in patterns that feel deliberate, as though the ocean has become an enemy with intention. When Jörmungandr moves, coastlines tremble, ships vanish. Salt water pours into places that have never tasted it. The line between land and sea blurs. The serpent's emergence is not simply a monster surfacing. It is the world's border unraveling. And from the realm of the dead, something stirs as well. Hell's domain was not designed for release. It is the place where souls arrive, not where they return. It is a realm of inevitability, where the dead settle into a silence that mirrors the earth above. But the prophecies say that at the end, Hell's forces will march. The dead do not remain behind their gate. The boundary between living and dead becomes thin, then tears. This does not mean ghosts drift gently through the snow. It means death becomes active. The dead become a host. And among those forces is a ship with a name that has haunted the imagination of the North for centuries. Naglfar. The ship of the dead is said to be built from nails, a grotesque image, intimate and unsettling. It turns ordinary human remains into a vehicle of cosmic war. Whether taken literally or as a symbolic representation of death's accumulation, the meaning is the same. Human loss becomes fuel. When the time comes, Naglfar is launched. The seas carry it forward. And then, inevitably, Loki is freed. His punishment was designed to be permanent. Bound with the entrails of one of his sons, held beneath a serpent dripping venom onto his face, Loki was meant to remain in suffering until the end. But the end has arrived. The bindings fail. The venom still falls, but pain no longer contains him. Loki rises. This moment is often imagined as triumph. But within the logic of the myth, it is less like victory and more like release. A force that was restrained is now simply moving toward what it was always destined to do. And the world responds. The earth shakes. This trembling is described in the sources as more than an earthquake. It feels like the cosmos shivering, as if Yggdrasil itself is reacting to the stress. Creatures that dwell within the world tree become restless. The stags that feed on its branches, the serpent that gnaws at its roots, the eagle perched at its height, all feel the change. The tree groans. And as the shaking spreads, other restraints fail. Chains rust. Walls crack. Borders fade. In Midgard, people experience this as dread made physical. The ground is no longer reliable. The sea is no longer predictable. The sky no longer offers stable signs. The world becomes unfamiliar. This is the stage in the prophecy where cause and effect tighten. Fimbulwinter weakened the world. Now the world cannot hold what it once held. The gods understand what is happening. They do not mistake this for random disaster. They recognize it as the inevitable sequence they have dreaded. Every binding they created was a delay. Now delay is over. This is why the phrase, "the breaking of all bonds," carries such weight. It is not only the escape of monsters. It is the collapse of the entire idea of restraint. Order, which once held chaos at bay, is now exposed as temporary. And once the bonds are broken, there is no repairing them. The world has entered a phase where nothing returns to its former place. What comes next is not simply struggle. It is convergence. All forces begin to gather. all paths begin to lead toward the same horizon. And the sound that will signal that final gathering is already drawing nearer, carried across the cold air like a breath held too long. The watchman will soon lift the horn. The last march is about to begin. The breaking of bonds is not chaos for its own sake. It is a summons. Once restraints fail, forces that were scattered, hidden, or contained begin to move with purpose. The world does not simply unravel at random, it begins to converge. In Norse prophecy, this is the moment when the end becomes organized. The gods understand it immediately. They feel it in the shaking of the earth. They see it in the strange behavior of the sky. They sense it in the way the realms, once held apart, begin to press against each other. And in Asgard, the atmosphere changes. The great halls that once rang with feasting grow quieter. The gods do not gather for celebration. They gather for grim preparation. It is not that they believe they can win. It is that they believe they must meet what comes. Odin moves first. He is not the kind of ruler who waits for disaster to strike. He has spent his entire existence preparing for Ragnarök, collecting knowledge, cultivating warriors, building alliances, and testing boundaries. Now, preparation becomes action. In some traditions, Odin rides out alone, seeking one last measure of certainty. He is the god most defined by the refusal to accept ignorance. Even when answers bring pain, he seeks them. He turns again toward wells and wisdom, not because he expects prophecy to change, but because he wants to see it clearly. To understand every detail, every sequence, every weakness, so that when the final hour arrives, he is not caught in confusion. Around him, the divine world shifts into its final posture. Heimdall stands at his watch. Heimdall is the guardian of the gods, boundary, stationed at the edge of Asgard, watching the bridge that links their realm to others. He is described as having extraordinary senses, sight keen enough to see across worlds, hearing sharp enough to catch the growth of grass. He does not sleep. Now his vigilance becomes unbearable, because for the first time in ages, he is no longer watching for the possibility of threat. He is watching the certainty of it. The bridge, Bifrost, gleams as it always has, radiant and strong, but the prophecy has always insisted it will break under the weight of the advancing forces. Bifrost was never meant to carry armies. It was meant to carry gods. In Midgard, humans sense the final shift without fully understanding its shape. War is already everywhere. Communities are scattered. Food is scarce. The winter has stripped away resilience. Now rumors spread of unnatural fires on the horizon, and seas that surge in patterns that feel deliberate. People speak of giants moving. They speak of the dead not staying quiet. They speak of a howl that carries over frozen valleys in the deep hours of night. The end feels close. In Jotunheim, the giants gather. It is important to understand this gathering without flattening it into simple villainy. Giants in Norse myth represent more than enemies. They represent the forces that the gods have always fought to contain. Flood, frost, wildfire, erosion, entropy. Now those forces are no longer content to remain at the edges. They move toward the center. Among them is Loki, newly freed. He does not return quietly. His release is a turning of the world's key, a signal to every creature that restraint is finished. Loki becomes a rallying figure not because he is the strongest, but because he has become the symbol of the gods' broken trust. He is vengeance made articulate. And he is not alone. From Muspelheim, Surtr advances. Muspelheim is the realm of fire, older than the ordered cosmos. It is not merely a place of flames, but a source of the heat that can melt creation back into primal chaos. Surtr is not described like an ordinary warrior. He is a force, carrying a sword that blazes with such intensity that it seems to contain the end itself. When Surtr moves, the air changes. Even across distance, heat becomes a warning. The myths describe multiple suns, forces of fire, riding forward with Surtr. Whether imagined as armies of beings or the personification of wildfire itself, the effect is the same. Fire begins to approach. At sea, Naglfar cuts through the waters. It is not a graceful ship, it is an omen made physical. It carries the dead and those aligned with Hell's realm. It carries what is meant to remain beneath the surface. The seas are no longer simply water. They are a road for the end. And then there is the serpent. Jörmungandr's movement does not cease. He does not rise once and sink again. His presence continues to disrupt the ocean, to collapse boundaries, to turn familiar coastlines into shattered edges. The sea becomes as hostile as the land. The gods respond by calling their dead. Valhalla, the Hall of the Slain, was never intended to be a final paradise. It was a training ground. The Einherjar, warriors chosen by Odin, have spent ages fighting and feasting, dying and rising again, sharpening themselves for one purpose. Now, their purpose arrives. The gates of Valhalla open. The hall that once echoed with laughter now hums with readiness. The Einherjar do not march to guarantee victory. They march because that is what they were chosen to do. The gods gather their own weapons. Thor takes up Mjolnir with the familiarity of a lifetime. The hammer's weight is steady, but the world around it is not. Freyr prepares, though the prophecy has always whispered that he will be without his greatest weapon. His loss is not a small detail. It is a reminder that earlier choices have consequences that cannot be undone. Tyr, marked by sacrifice, faces what comes with the quiet understanding of a being who already knows what it means to pay a price. Even the gods who are less defined by war, those tied to beauty, poetry, healing, and fertility, feel the tightening of fate. This is not an age where any divine role remains untouched. Everything is drawn into the final confrontation. And then, across the worlds, a sound rises. Gjallarhorn. The horn of Heimdall is not blown in panic. It is blown as announcement. Its call is said to carry through every realm, reaching Asgard, Midgard, Jotunheim, and beyond. It is the signal that the final march has begun and that the last battle is no longer future. When Gjallarhorn sounds, the gods do not debate. They do not hesitate. They move. Because in the Norse worldview, the greatest failure is not dying. It is meeting fate with cowardice. And so the final march begins, not as a chaotic rush, but as an organized convergence of everything that has been building since the first crack in trust. The world has been dimming. Now it gathers itself for flame. When Gjallarhorn sounds, it does not simply call warriors. It calls the world to witness its own ending. The sound travels through every realm, vibrating through bone and root, through ice and flame, through the quiet halls of the dead and the storm-racked seas. It is not an alarm in the way a human might understand it. It is a declaration. The final hour has arrived. The battlefield is not a single field. It is the whole cosmos pressed into one moment. The sources describe the conflict as taking shape at Vigridr, a great plain, vast enough to hold armies beyond counting. But even as warriors gather there, Ragnarök is not confined to any one location. The sea heaves, the sky darkens, the world tree groans. Fire and frost advance from opposite ends of existence. As the forces assemble, the old boundaries fail completely. Bifrost, the shining bridge, bears more weight than it was meant to carry. The coming host does not travel gently. Whether it is the fire forces of Muspelheim, the giants of Jotunheim, or the pressure of doom itself, the bridge finally gives. The radiant structure shatters. The gods' realm is no longer protected by distance or separation. What was once unreachable is now exposed, and the battle begins. It is important to understand how Norse myth portrays this moment. This is not a story where the righteous triumph and the wicked are punished. This is a story where every force meets its destined opposite. Each confrontation is an answer. Each death is a fulfillment. Thor steps forward. He is the most familiar defender of Midgard, the one whose strength has held chaos at bay for centuries. He is not subtle. He is not patient. He is the god of immediate action, of raw response, of the hammer swung in the face of terror. Now the terror rises from the sea. Jörmungandr surges onto the land, a shape too vast to be fully grasped. His body, once wrapped around the world like a boundary, now becomes a weapon. Poison rides his breath. The sea's salt and the winter's frost cling to him like armor. Thor meets him without hesitation. Mjolnir crashes down. The battle between Thor and the serpent is not just a fight between two beings. It is a clash between protection and inevitability. Thor strikes again and again, each blow ringing like thunder through the plain. The serpent coils, lashes, sprays venom into the air. The ground breaks beneath their weight. The sky trembles with the violence of it. At last, Thor lands the blow the prophecy promised. Jörmungandr falls. The serpent dies, but victory is not release. The serpent's poison fills the air. Thor staggers, his breath turning ragged, the venom working through even a god's body. He takes steps. The sources say 9, and then he falls. Thor's death is one of the clearest expressions of Ragnarok's logic. He wins, and he dies. Nearby, Odin moves toward his own destined confrontation. The All-Father is not merely a warrior. He is a strategist, a seeker of knowledge, a god who has spent his life preparing for this moment. He rides into battle with the dignity of someone who has already accepted the outcome. He faces Fenrir. The wolf's presence is described as overwhelming. His jaws open wide, stretching toward the sky and down toward the earth, as though he could swallow the horizon itself. Odin attacks. But strength and wisdom do not undo fate. Fenrir closes his jaws. Odin is devoured. This is one of the starkest moments in Norse myth. The ruler of the gods, the one who thought further than any other, is taken by the force he helped create through fear and binding. Yet even here, there is response. Vidar, Odin's son, steps forward. Vidar is the quiet one, associated with vengeance and endurance. He has been preparing as well, though not through prophecy and questioning. His preparation is silent. He meets Fenrir. The myths describe Vidar as wearing a special shoe, strengthened by scraps of leather saved across ages, a detail that feels almost domestic against the cosmic scale of the battle. Yet it carries significance. Small actions, repeated over time, create power. Vidar drives his foot into the wolf's jaw. He forces Fenrir's mouth open, and he tears the wolf apart. The devourer is undone. But Odin does not return. The victory is vengeance, not restoration. Elsewhere, Tyr meets Garm. Garm is associated with the underworld, often described as a hound bound at the entrance to Hell's realm. Like Fenrir, Garm is restrained until the end. Like Fenrir, he breaks free when the bonds fail. Tyr, already marked by sacrifice, confronts this final threat. Their battle is brutal and direct. Tyr kills Garm, and Tyr falls as well. The pattern repeats. Opposites meet. Both perish. Freyr faces Surtr. Freyr, tied to fertility, prosperity, and peace, stands against a force of consuming fire. It is a pairing that feels intentionally cruel. The god who brings harvest meets the being who brings scorched earth. And Freyr is disadvantaged. He is said to be without his greatest weapon. This is not random. It is consequence. Earlier choices, earlier exchanges, earlier moments of carelessness or necessity now return as doom. Freyr fights. But Surtr's fire is overwhelming. Surtr strikes. Freyr falls. In this moment, the land's future seems to die with him. And then, in one of the most intimate confrontations of Ragnarok, Heimdall faces Loki. They have been opposed for a long time. Heimdall is boundary and vigilance. Loki is breach and disruption. One watches the edge. One crosses it. Now they meet at the center. Their battle is not described in long detail, but its meaning is unmistakable. The Guardian and the Breaker cannot coexist in the new world that follows. They fight. They kill one another. And with their deaths, something symbolic is completed. The old order, defined by boundaries and the testing of them, is finished. Around the plain, giants clash with gods. The Einherjar fall in waves. The dead surge forward. The air fills with heat, ash, salt, and poison. The world tree shudders under the strain. At the end of this battle, it becomes clear that the gods, despite their courage, cannot hold the cosmos together through strength alone. Because the enemy is not merely an army. The enemy is inevitability. And Surtr still stands. He lifts his flaming sword. The blade is not just a weapon. It is the spark that returns creation to chaos. Fire sweeps outward. Not like a campfire. Not like a city burning. Like the undoing of the world. Flames climb the sky. Forests vanish. Mountains glow and crack. The sea boils at the edges. The boundary between realms dissolves as heat consumes structure. The gods fall. The monsters fall. And the world itself begins to fail. Ragnarok is unleashed. And what remains after the last battle is not victory. It is aftermath. After the last blows are struck, the battle does not truly end. It dissolves. Ragnarok is not concluded by victory cries or surrender. It concludes by collapse. The forces that clashed do not retreat. They burn out, fall away, or are swallowed by what they have unleashed. Surtr's fire continues. With the gods fallen and the old order shattered, there is nothing left to contain it. The flames spread outward from the battlefield, not as a weapon wielded with intent, but as a natural consequence of release. Fire consumes the realms. Forests vanish first, igniting with a sound like breath drawn too sharply. Mountains crack and glow from within, their stones splitting as heat reaches places never meant to feel it. Rivers boil. The air thickens with ash and smoke, darkening what remains of the sky. The burning is not selective. Sacred places fall alongside ordinary ones. Halls of gods collapse beside human settlements already weakened by winter and war. Nothing is spared by virtue of meaning. This is an important distinction. Ragnarok does not preserve what is noble. It resets what exists. As fire spreads across the land, the sea responds. The myths describe the earth sinking beneath the waves. Whether this is imagined as flooding, driven by melting ice and boiling oceans, or as a symbolic return of the world to its primordial state, the effect is the same. Boundaries dissolve. Coastlines vanish. Islands slip beneath the surface. The distinction between land and sea becomes meaningless as water claims what fire has weakened. Jörmungandr's death does not calm the oceans. If anything, it worsens the chaos. The serpent once formed a ring that held the seas in check. With his fall, the waters move without restraint. Storms rise without pattern. Waves crash far inland. The horizon disappears beneath rolling water and steam. The world is undone from both directions. Above, the sky is unrecognizable. Smoke obscures the stars. The sun and moon, already lost, no longer mark time. Darkness is not complete, but it is constant. A dim, choking gloom lit only by fire's glow. Yggdrasil shudders. The world tree has endured countless assaults. Creatures gnawed at its roots. Storms battered its branches, even during the battle it held. Now it bends. The sources do not describe Yggdrasil's destruction in detail, but they emphasize its suffering. The tremors that pass through it are felt everywhere. Realms strain against their attachments. Paths between worlds collapse. The structure that once held existence together loosens. This is not simply destruction. It is unmaking. As the fire completes its work and the waters settle into dominance, the noise fades. The clash of weapons ends. The cries of warriors disappear. The roar of flame softens into crackle, then into embers. Even the sea's violence quiets as there is less left to strike. Silence follows. This silence is not peaceful. It is absence. There are no gods issuing commands, no giants advancing, no armies marching. The world, stripped of its actors, lies submerged and scorched, drifting toward stillness. For a time that is not measured, nothing happens. The myths do not rush this moment. They linger, because this silence matters. It is the pause between cycles. It is the breath held after catastrophe. In this aftermath, the old world is truly gone. Not only its rulers, but its assumptions. The idea that the cosmos can be held permanently in balance has been burned away. What remains is potential. But that potential is not immediately visible. First, there is emptiness. Water stretches in every direction. Ash floats on its surface. Heat slowly fades. The last embers sink beneath the waves. No voices speak. No prayers rise. No prophecies are uttered. Ragnarök has fulfilled itself, and the world rests in ruin. This is not the end of the story, but it is the end of the old one. After silence, something stirs. Not immediately. The Norse myths do not hurry rebirth. They allow the world to remain empty long enough for the weight of loss to settle. Only after destruction has fully exhausted itself does renewal begin. Slowly, the waters recede. The sea that swallowed the land begins to withdraw, not violently but patiently, as if the world itself is breathing again for the first time. Where endless water once stretched, shapes emerge. Dark soil breaks the surface. Stones glisten, washed clean by flood and fire. The earth rises. This is not the old world restored. It is a new one revealed. The myths are careful here. They do not describe the reborn earth as identical to what came before. There is no suggestion that the past has been undone. The scars of Ragnarök remain, even as life returns. Green spreads. Fields grow where ashes once lay. Plants emerge without being sown. The land is fertile, but untouched, a world without history, waiting to be shaped. This rebirth is quiet. There are no great proclamations, no divine command. Life resumes because the conditions for life have returned, and life endures. Among the survivors are humans. Lif and Lithrausir emerge from their shelter, having endured Ragnarök hidden within the world tree's reach. The myths are sparse on detail, but their significance is immense. Humanity does not begin again through conquest or divine favor. It begins through endurance. Two figures step into a silent world and become the ancestors of all who follow. Their survival suggests that even at the height of destruction, life found a way to persist quietly, without heroics. They inherit a world without gods ruling openly over it. This matters. The reborn world is not governed the same way as the old one. Divine presence is reduced, changed, or distant. Some gods do return. Baldur comes back from Hell's realm, no longer defined by death but by renewal. His return is not framed as triumph, but as restoration of balance. With him comes Thor, his brother, no longer bound by the tragedy that once defined them both. They do not resume the old order. They represent a gentler one. Magni and Modi, sons of Thor, survive. They inherit Mjolnir, not as a symbol of endless war, but as a reminder of what strength once cost. The hammer endures, but its meaning shifts. Power is no longer celebrated for its own sake. It is remembered. Other gods are mentioned as survivors or returnees, but the emphasis is not on rebuilding Asgard as it was. The myths do not describe new walls rising. They do not describe feasts resuming. They describe presence. Enough gods remain for continuity, but not enough for dominance. This restraint is deliberate. The world after Ragnarok is meant to be different. And above all, it is meant to continue. The sun returns. Not the same sun, but her daughter, who takes her place in the sky. Light is restored without erasing loss. Time begins again, measured by days and seasons, not prophecy and dread. This detail matters deeply. The cycle does not repeat exactly. It evolves. The new world carries memory, but it is not imprisoned by it. This is where Ragnarok reveals its true meaning. It is not a warning meant to terrify. It is a worldview. To the Norse, the universe was never promised permanence. Everything existed under strain. Gods, worlds, families, even laws. What mattered was not preventing the end, but meeting it with integrity. The gods did not fail because they died. They succeeded because they faced what they knew was coming. Ragnarok affirms that destruction is not the opposite of meaning. It is part of it. The end clears space. What grows afterward carries the weight of what was lost, and that weight gives it shape. For the people who told these stories, living in a harsh land, facing long winters, famine, violence, and uncertainty, this mattered. The myth did not promise safety. It promised resilience. It promised that even when the world burns and sinks and falls silent, something remains. Life, memory, choice. And so the story of Ragnarok does not end with fire. It ends with earth, with green fields rising from the sea, with survivors stepping forward, with a future no one has yet written. If you've stayed with me through this long journey, thank you. Stories like these endure because they remind us that endings are not always erasure. Sometimes they are thresholds. If you enjoy these slow explorations of myth and history, consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps keep these quiet stories alive, and it lets me know you'd like to hear more. For now, rest. The old world has ended, and a new one has begun.